This one trade could make the Denver Nuggets champions again. While we are still in the playoffs, a majority of the teams are at home, one of them being the reigning champion Denver Nuggets. And given the fact that most people pick them either to repeat or to make the NBA Finals, getting knocked out in the second round means you have to address some issues in the offseason. So what do they need specifically? I think they need depth, and that's why I think they might have to trade Michael Porter Jr. Obviously, you know if you watch my videos, I never try to call for someone to be traded, but at the same time, I'm trying to address, the issues that Denver has and what I think they could do from a business standpoint and a team standpoint to make them championship contenders again. I said this last offseason when they lost Bruce Brown and Jeff Green in free agency. I said they are going to miss those two so much because they did so much for them in the playoffs, and you can really see how thin they were on the bench this season, but especially in the playoffs. Their depth was not there. And that was something that I and a lot of people, saw when they didn't get those two back on the roster. And they didn't really pick up anybody else to replace them. Yes, Peyton Watson actually had a very good year. He stepped up. He was really good this year. A lot of good defensive plays, by the way. But I said you can't just rely on Peyton Watson and Christian Brown, who are second-year players, but they didn't play a ton of time last year. Christian Brown got a decent amount of time in the playoffs, but even still, they're so young, it's hard to ask so much out of them when they don't have much experience. So in order to be a championship contender again, like I said, I think they need depth. And Michael Porter Jr. is kind of the odd man out here, because you're not trading Jokic, of course, and I don't think you're trading Jamal Murray either. So that means Michael Porter Jr. is the odd man out, because not only is he young with still a lot of potential, and if you remember, before, he got drafted and stuff like that, because of his back issues is why he fell in the draft. Because his ceiling and his potential was supposed to be sky high, and he could have been maybe a top 5 pick if it wasn't for the back injuries. So with all that being said, not only is the potential still there, he still can play basketball, but he also has a large contract, which actually works in Denver's favor, because then they can make a trade for someone who is typically, a better player, if that makes sense, because you get the bigger contracts when you're a better player for most of the time. So my thinking is, what if you trade him to a team like Portland, for example, who is clearly rebuilding, but at the same time, they would love to gather younger players who have a lot of potential and up-and-coming talent. That's kind of why they traded for DeAndre Ayton. But here's who they have on the roster still who could be available for Denver. What if they trade Michael Porter Jr. and they get Matisse Thybulle, who has been known throughout his career for being a very, very good defender, so they'll have that depth on their bench. And you also get Malcolm Brogdon, so you'll have a backup point guard for Jamal Murray. And you do have Reggie Jackson, and he stepped up in his role, but I feel like you need, he was 6th man of the year in Boston. This literally just happened. I know it seems so long ago, but before he was traded to Portland this past offseason, he was 6th man of the year. Malcolm Brogdon is also a very, very good three-point shooter, so it'll add shooting to the team. And the only issue you have to worry about is potentially his health. But, you have to take a chance somewhere. Michael Porter Jr. has had health issues as well. Like I said, he's been healthy lately. But there's somewhere you got to give, if that makes sense. The Blazers also have DeAndre Ayton on the roster. I don't know if they're willing to part ways with DeAndre Ayton. And I know DeAndre Ayton is not a fan favorite for a lot of people, but he still could be a quality backup big to Jokic if they want to go that direction and get a backup big. Because DeAndre Ayton was a starter on the Phoenix Suns. So someone who was averaging 17 and 10 or whatever he was, that's definitely good numbers you could put up off the bench and give Jokic some rest minutes. Or they can go in the direction of Jeremy Grant, but I don't think that makes sense because Michael Porter Jr. and him play the same position and they're not the same player. But I feel like that wouldn't make sense to give up Michael Porter Jr. Even though you would get 2 players in return, because in this deal we're including Matisse Thybulle or someone of that caliber. I still don't think that makes sense because why would you give up Michael Porter Jr. then? To me, it's you have to add depth by getting a backup big for Jokic or a backup point guard for Jamal Murray, and then adding either shooting off the bench or a very, very good defender. So what if you go in the direction of the Cavs? I don't know if they would do this, and I don't know that Darius Garland wants to come off the bench. So I don't know how realistic this is, but there have been talks that, Darius Garland might request a trade, and we'll see if Donovan Mitchell's getting traded or if Darius Garland's staying. We'll see. But what if you can get Darius Garland from the Cavs if he wants out? And like I said, I don't know if he wants to come off the bench, but imagine having Darius Garland as your backup point guard. That would be insane. I don't know if it would work him starting with Jamal Murray. I don't think that makes much sense. So it's just something to consider. What if you talk to Orlando? I mean, they have so much young talent on that team, and they have a plethora of guards. So you got Cole Anthony, you got Markelle Fultz, you got Jalen Suggs, and you have Anthony Black. So I think they'd be willing to part ways with one of those players, and then you have to see what else they would be willing to offer, in order to get back in return. Because I think Michael Porter Jr. actually fits what they do, because they were not a very good three-point shooting team. And Michael Porter Jr., we know, is good at shooting the three. So I think he actually fits alongside what the Magic are trying to do and enhances them from that standpoint. And obviously he's a champion, so he has experience that he can bring to the team. I just have to think about what exactly you would get back in return if you're in Denver. Like I said, you would get one of those guards. I don't know which one. I think Jalen Suggs would probably be the one that Orlando would be most likely to give up. And Jalen Suggs, don't forget, he was a lottery pick. Another team to talk to would be the Brooklyn Nets, because they are in that weird spot again where it feels like they really should go full rebuild mode, but at the same time, they're in that in-between spot, but I'm sure they're open to listening to offers. So I don't know exactly what you would get back from Michael Porter Jr. because, again, if they're going in full rebuild mode, Michael Porter Jr., it's not that he's old. Like I said, he's still young. He's still 25. But at the same time, they're getting back a 25-year-old and Mikal Bridges is 26, 27. And I'm not saying they're trading Mikal Bridges for Michael Porter Jr., but what I'm saying is the timeline is still similar with the ages. So I don't know if Brooklyn would necessarily do the deal. But what if you could do a deal with Brooklyn and you get Dorian Finney-Smith, who has, been known as a very, very good defender, especially on Dallas, and he could shoot the three. So what if you get him and maybe you pick up, who else could you get? I don't know if the money works, but what if you can get Cam Johnson, who we know can shoot the three? He can shoot, he can score, and like I said, Dorian Finney-Smith. So that could be an option too if the money works. Again, I'm not sure. I have to look at the salaries. You may also be able to and have to do a 3-team deal here if you want to get maybe 3 players back. It really just depends, on what you're trying to trade Michael Porter Jr. for. But at least 2. That's the whole point. If you're just trading to get 1 player, unless that 1 player is Giannis or something like that, obviously. But if you're just trading him to increase your depth, I feel like it has to be 2 or more players. And in that case, again, it might have to be a 3-team deal. So then that way you can get 3 players. And then, you can be championship contenders again. When I say championship contenders, if they don't make any moves this offseason, of course, if they have Jokic and Jamal Murray and the team is healthy, they're going to be in the playoffs and they're going to be someone who is, a potential contender. But what I mean by what I said is to put them over the top again in order to win a championship. So I guess championship contender is the wrong word, but you know what I mean.